is one mesiv? How does one lean? So the first thing is that one has to realize why do we lean, and once you know why we lean, so really Rabbi Gradowitz touched on this a little bit. Even though for us the leaning is not something that is an act of cherus, is an act of a feeling of how a wealthy man acts, but there are the kasha is the kasha that we ask in the Manishtana, right? Shabachal Alevis Inanu, and that we eat ben Yeshvin and ben Mesubin, Halayla Azeh Kulanu Mesubin. So tonight we eat Mesubin. We eat when we're leaning. So once we know that the reason why we're eating while we're leaning is because that's an act of an opposite of the Avadim Hayinu Parvi Mitzrayim. It's an act of a feeling of redemption, a feeling of freedom. So the leaning has to be in such a form that one would feel that freedom. Meaning, if someone would the common issue is, but can I drink something b'diavad when I'm just leaning like that in the free air? So when I'm leaning in the free air, that's not a ma'aseh cherus. Right? Although I'm leaning, but this is as you can't call it mudag. You can't call it that you're concerned. It's in a concerned manner, but it's definitely not in a free, not in a luxurious, not in a freedom kind of a position. So if many of us are sitting by the table, not all of us have armchairs, and not all of us have pillows that we could be able to lean on, and that would one of the first issue that we have with a seder is to know that one has to, in order for a heseba to be considered a heseba, one has to lean on something. If you lean in the free air, that's not considered a heseba. So if someone doesn't have any armchair, the easiest thing would be to either take another chair and lean on the other chair, or if you don't have another chair, probably just to turn your chair, drop, and use the table as a way of leaning on it. So just what's important to know is free air is not considered a heseba. Heseba on any surface, on anything that would give me a support, that would be considered a heseba. Now, obviously, the same thing would be considered a heseba on someone else. They would also go into that category of a heseba. I was able to lean on my friend, on him. That would also be considered a heseba, because that's an act of it's not free air. When you're leaning in free air, that's not an act of cherus as opposed to leaning on someone. Now, women are exempt in reality from the mitzvah heseba. Although in halacha it would be mashma that women do have to be mesiv. The common custom is that women are not mesiv, but although if they want to, they're definitely allowed to. But what's important for us to know about women is that for them to drink while they're standing would be a problem, because while you're standing is an act. Again, it's an act of slavery. It's an act of eating or drinking while you're not in a free kind of a situation. Meaning there's the two concepts of heseba. There's heseba of not being b'derech avdus, and there's a concept of being b'derech cherus. So if I'm walking around while I'm drinking, and this would apply for us as well on the third and the fourth cup, where the heseba is not ma'akiv. So if someone by mistake and realizes it's getting late and you got to get something and you forgot that you have to be mesiv, and you quickly take that cup. So if it's while you're walking, that would be a problem, because that's an act of avdus. That's not an act of cherus. So we have the ma'aseh cherus that one has to be doing. He has to be leaning on a supported kind of a supported thing, or on a person, or on a table, on a chair, or at least that it's not in the free air, and if he's not walking around, which would also be a problem. Now, the reason why heseba smoil is the ultimate heseba is for two reasons. One reason that we know is because we're afraid Shemiyaktim Kanal Beshet, If you're going to lean on your right side, then we're afraid of the sakana. So that reason of Chazal that we're afraid of that you're going to be machtim kana leveshet, that would take away from the eating of freedom. It's not that much that that the shema yachtim kana leveshet itself. Not only that we're afraid of, it's like really the ultimate would have been to lie on your right side. We can't do it because of a sakana, so we do it on the left side. It's not the way it is. It's because of the chashash and the concern that maybe shema yachtim kana leveshet. Therefore, the position of freedom is a position by leaning on your left side. That's one reason why the Seba Smoil is the ultimate Seba. And the second reason is because if you lean on, most of the time the side you're leaning on is not the side that you wouldn't be able to hold something in that hand, and you'll be able to hold something in your access would be in the other hand. Right? If I'm leaning on this side, so I can't really get the cup, I can't really get the matzah, we're in the position that it's supposed to be. So when I'm leaning, even the act of freedom is I want to be able to do whatever it is. Take that bottle and say, in those days, right? So, that's where we would imagine, and how they would be drinking the wine. So by us drinking on the left side, we give accessibility to our right hand, and that's where we'll be able to hold the matzah, we'll be able to hold the cup, and that's what it's supposed to be done. Every mitzvah a person should ideally hold in the right hand. Hold a cup of wine when you're making kiddush in the right hand, holding the matzah in your right hand. Even when one makes a bracha, ideally they should be holding everything in the right hand. So in order to give the right hand the proper accessibility, we lean on the left side. So there's the two reasons, and that would be the reason why why that would make it more an act of freedom by leaning on the left side. So we have two reasons for that.
Just interject for a moment. The theme is Haseba.
We're finishing up. I'm talking about Haseba, okay. But we're finishing up the Kaddish.
Where do we learn that the Haseba is the symbol of Chayrus? Like, is there a Makor in the Torah? Why that? There could be other things.
There is a Makor. The Gemara brings a Makor for it. The Gemara Navi Pesachim. But it's one of the things that the Chazal took out, and from the culture that was in the days of when the Keveah, the Tzuras HaSeder, the Tanoim still, not Chazal, not our rabbis, but way back when, the Tanoim Marror, because we see this in the Manashtana, right? The Manashtana was written, it's a Mishnah, the Manashtana. So way back when, they felt that this was a culture that this is something that's an act of showing a certain level of freedom. Now, in Halakha it's brought down, and the Rambam brings it down like this: ideally one should be leaning throughout the whole meal. Now, obviously it's not a practice that's commonly accepted by us. It's not something that we do, but it is something for people who have that reclining chair and that ability to be able to do it. It is a good. It's a minhag that's brought down in Halakha. But two points that's important to bring out when one should not be mesiv is while they're saying the Haggadah. While one's saying the Haggadah, which is he's really reliving the exile, he's really reliving the Galus of Mitzrayim. At that point is not the point that we're going to be that one should have the action of freedom. The feeling of freedom, meaning the whole night we're busy going back and forth from freedom to Galus, right? Back and forth. Cheres Galus, Cheres Galus. So Kiddush, we have the Kiddush, and then we right away Mesiv, and then we do some Karpas, which has the salt water. We have a little bit of the action of maybe Avdus again, and then Halak Anya, the Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is going through the Galus until we get to Asher Ga'alanu. Right? We have the two chapters that we say from Halal, the beginning to Kapitla of a couple of Kapitla we say before Asher Ga'alanu, and then we get to the Geula. At that point, we're ready to be Mesiv. So by the Birchas Ga'alanu, from that point, we should really be able to be Mesiv, and that would be by the Suda as well, the Suda which is the Suda of Cheres. And that's why a person should have all the silver on at the table. You should try to have whatever delicacies you have, although not all of us are interested. At 1 o'clock, especially now, we change the clock, pushes off our Seder another hour later. Not everyone's interested in eating all these meals, but at least the environment of the Seder should be such an environment of wealth and of, like Rabbi Bradwood said over from the Marror, that he used to put on the gold and silver that he would have, even people just gave him as collateral for loans, but he would put on his table, because that's an act of wealth that someone feels soothing. I thought he would say it, but at a conversation with him, we once had Rabbeinu Tam used to hold gold coins while he was learning, just to give him that feeling of freedom. Now, I don't know if they were his or not, but it's that kind of thing. When you're in an environment of wealth, you feel at ease, and you feel in a more of a state of mind of chayrus. So that's really the idea. One of the ideas, obviously, it's Keilu Hu Ba'atzma Yatzmi Mitzrayim, as if he himself has gone out of Galus, but it's in whatever levels we're able to do it. Although we don't have that level of freedom, and we know what's going on all over the world, and that really could confine us. And we know that we're in some sort of a Memteh Shari Tumah, if not a Nun Shari Tumah by now. So we are kind of in Galus, but in Kol Zeis we still have to have that freedom, and when we have that feeling of freedom to the Galus Mitzrayim, that could help us go out of Mitzrayim. So one time that during the Haggadah is when one should not be laying down, and something else this is kind of people make a bit of a mistake in this, that when a person is making the bracha of whichever bracha they're making, they also should not be behaseba. And this is something that commonly people don't realize. You get yourself all set up, because you don't want to have a interruption between the bracha and the positioning yourself until you drink. So positioning yourself could take yourself a couple of seconds, just to get back into that proper position. So what you do is you have that cup, and so the thing is, when one makes a bracha, a person is not supposed to be making a bracha while he's lying down. So it's not with the kovid rosh, and it's not the way one makes the bracha. So birchas hashaga alanu should be made while he's sitting, the same way it should be while he's doing the Seder. Birchas hamatzah, achilas matzah, birchas hamoitzi, all of that, and should all be done when he's sitting properly. And then after that, that's not called a hefsek when obviously he shouldn't be busy. The pillow is finding the pillow that the kid took away. That's something he could definitely do before he makes the bar priagafen. Not something he has to start getting busy with himself. Oh, he forgot to switch his armchair. But the actual leaning back, the Maisa Heseba, that should be done before he after he makes the bracha. The bracha should be.
Why are you going to say that? Just say that.
It's something. Yeah, it's something that. I go through the before I come here, I go through the Seder again to try to think of the different practicalities and different things that come up. And I know by myself, this is many people around the Seder. I see, different guests and different even family members, and I try to make a point to them, like, this is not the way it should be done. But it's because people think it's by Pragafen, it's like all part of it. Achilas matzah, definitely. I know by myself when I was younger, that's the way it was. You get yourself all stacked up, the hamaitzi, and you're ready to roll. So the one who's making the Seder, so he still has to give out the different portions. So he doesn't have the issue, because he's still giving his wife and his children and the guests the hamaitzi. But when you're a recipient, when you're just one of the attendants at the Seder, that's really when it applies. If you make your own independent achilas matzah, which we do. Children, if the children have to be masive, if they have to lean, so obviously it's a mitzvah of chinuch, and really the most important time of chinuch throughout the year that we have is the Leil Seder. So although a child might be, it might not, parents might not want it, because what's going to happen with that cup of wine. If you tell him that he could be masive, if you tell a child, 7, 8, 9-year-old, that he could be masive, he's going to have himself a purple shirt by the time the first cup is finished, and he's going to start crying. But on the other hand, obviously you could, the chiyuv of chinuch is from 10 years old. But ideally the chinuch should begin at from 6 to 7 years old, because that's the time when they start realizing what's happening, and that's they learn it in school, and it's enough that they understand what they're saying by Manishtana. Some of them from around the 6 or 7 year old point. That should be the time of chinuch. Now, someone who doesn't want the children to be being massive from 6 years old, or even 7, 8, 9, probably, or even 10 years old, what he could probably do is just get him some sort of a feeling of Haseba would be enough, meaning to get himself a comfortable chair, a drop different, just to show that the Seder is a different kind of. It should somehow correspond with his questions at the Seder. He's asking the Manishtana, all nights we're eating, sitting or lying down, and tonight we're eating lying down. And like, hey, where's my chair? I get to sit, in a straight jacket tonight, while everyone else is sitting and leaning back. That's, so the idea of even if it's only giving him a pillow, or giving him something to realize that he's getting there to our level of Haseba, although he doesn't have to make himself the purple shirt thing. A lefty still has to be masive on his left side, although his free hand was just really going to the two reasons that I said before. Why is it Derech Eretz is Shem Yaktim Kamal Aveshet, or because he has his free arm. His right hand doesn't do much for him. It's really his left hand that he wants to have accessibility to. So when we have the two reasons, obviously the Shem Yaktim Kamal Aveshet takes priority. But the difference between a lefty and a righty is that in case one has been masive on the right side, right, but mistakenly, so a righty who has a regular righty who is masive on his right side, but the Yabed is not yet his Haseba and still has to drink over or eat over the Achilas Matzah in the times that the Achilas Matzah is when the Haseba is Ma'akiv. As opposed to a lefty has the other reasoning of to get his free accessibility of his other hand, so he has that leniency that he doesn't have to eat over or drink over. So the lefty does have that. For the B'diavad scenario, he has the right Haseba would be considered Haseba.
In this case, he would hold the cup in his right hand.
Well, the lefty is always.
It's kind of hard on the left if you're lefty.
Yeah, so I guess that's the issue. When he makes the bracha, he's probably going to be doing it in his left hand, right? Because that's where the lefties, that's where they do it. Most of them, anyways. Halacha, that's where they're supposed to be doing it, in the left hand.
That's what you're saying. Because when you make the bracha, you don't need anything.
And then I guess you got to quickly switch it over. Yeah, something like that.
That makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Someone who's uncomfortable with being masive on the left hand. Now, not just because they're uncomfortable, because it's not something that we normally do. So for us, it's not. Same way, it's not an act of freedom. It's not it's not necessarily the most comfortable position. But if it's like he has himself a bruise or whatever it is on his left side, a cast or something, something that would be hard for him to position himself in that way. There's no Indian in him being masive on his right side as a second case scenario. Unless he might be a lefty, that probably would speak to a rabbi, and I imagine that's what they would say. But for such a person, there wouldn't be a chiyuv haseba. If some person, if it's just not an act of freedom, then we're all in that boat, I assume. But if it's an act of, we'll call it avdus, meaning I'm going in an uncomfortable position, that would be a problem. Now, to be masive, I think I don't think I spoke of that before when we were speaking about walking around. We mentioned before, even for women or for us by the third or fourth case, walking around is not considered a haseba. It's an act of avdus. And the other position, when some people think, we were talking about what happens if you don't have an armchair. So either you use your friend's back or shoulder, or you use the next chair on the side of you, or we said you swift around your chair and you get yourself on the table. But another position that one would want to do would be simply to go on his leg, put his arm on his leg, and do it like that. Right? So I'm not in free air, but I'm still being masive on something. So Lamaisa, it's brought down, and I saw this from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He's in Halichah Shlomo. He says that one should not do that because you wouldn't be Yotze the Chiyuv Haseba, because that's an act of daiga, of worriness. It's like that kind of a feeling of it doesn't give you the act of freedom. So whatever alternative someone's using as different Haseba methods, you just have to make sure it's not on the expense, or wouldn't go into the category of avdus, which would be a problem. Now, as regard to being Mesiv, many of us have, we go to our rabbis for a Seder, and so on and so forth. It's important to get explicit permission from them that they don't mind if they're being Mesiv. Without an explicit rishus, it would probably be somewhat of an issue, if not a big problem, to be Mesiv, because it's not derech eretz and covered to just sit and relax and all chilled out while you're in front of your Rav. Okay, really we're supposed to be finished. I'm just going to go through a drop of the just into the next. This is all a continuation from last year. So the 3 times that Haseba is ma'akim, and that's really what we're going to go into now, is during the Dalet Kaisis, during the Achilas Matzah of Chiyuv, which is the Kazayas after the Birch Samaitzi. Only the first Kazayas, which is the Iker Chiyuv. Now obviously, many of us have a second Kazayas together with that, because we want to get Afikaiman, and we have different halachas. But the actual halacha that has to be done is the Dalet Kaisis, the Kazayas Matzah, which would include the Afikaiman later on as well, which is really 4 times, just to break it down. We have the Kazayas Matzah, the Afikaiman, and Korech, while he's eating the Korech. Marror is a time when Marror should not be, I forgot to mention that before, Marror should not be eaten b'aseba, obviously, because that's not an act of cheres, that's an act of slavery. Okay, so now the Achilas Matzah, I'm going to try to just say 4 points and move on from this, and we'll get to Marror and the Kaira and the Seder next week, hopefully. The matzah that one needs to have, and I see as the share is going on, we have boxes moving through the hallway of the Shmura Matzah. Shmura Matzah, the definition of Shmura Matzah is that it was watched. Watched after l'shem matzah, meaning l'shem matzah in the kavana when they were watching it, or when they were making the matzah, was so that we'll be able to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Achilas Matzah, the first Kazayas Matzah of the night of Pesach. So if you ever go into the matzah bakeries, you hear them Tzazamen L'Shem Matzah Mitzvah. The kavanah has to be, the ultimate kavanah is, and that's in order to make it Shmura Matzah. Shmura is not something that it's watched. All matzah on Pesach have to be watched matzah. They all have to be Shmura Matzah in that sense. That no chametz, that it didn't, wasn't 18 minutes, it wasn't sitting around. But the level, what we need to have for the kazayas matzah and for the afikaiman, needs to be shemura matzah l'shem mitzvah. That's another level of matzah, and we don't, obviously it's not packaged of shemura matzah l'shem mitzvah. All matzah is matzah, and shemura matzah is what we refer to as shemura matzah l'shem mitzvah. If one doesn't have Shemur Matzah L'Shem Mitzvah, it's questionable if he's Mekayim the Mitzvah B'chlal. Now, one of the issues, not going into the issue B'chlal, I'm just bringing out the point, one of the issues about eating machine matzahs is really this, is could I put into the machine, when I flip on that switch, and the whole process and all the, everything else is going in, when I'm switching on that switch, is that L'Shem Matzah's Mitzvah of the Kazayas Rishon, does that somehow infuse the L'Shma into the matzah? The matzah has to be done l'shma, like when someone is writing a Sefer Torah, right? So I remember a couple of years ago, I forgot what you call it, when you fill in, what do you call it, the kids, a tracing
stencil?
A stencil, right? So what they had was, they had a machine, they had a stencil of how the amud of the Sefer Torah should look, right? Computerized, they made that stencil, plastic, and then what they did was they flipped the ink, they threw on a whole spot of ink on the whole thing, and they wanted to have l'shem, except for the Shem Hashem, and that they even on the Shem Hashem, you mechaben l'Shem Hashem, and would that be enough? So obviously there's many issues with that, and obviously such a tape Torah would probably be a mehudadik puzzle. But yeah, it has to be. No, today with the computer, you'd be able to do anything. But the point that I want to bring out from this was that it would be hard for someone to say that when I'm switching on that switch and I'm going to think L'Shem Kedushas Hashem, L'Shem Sefer Torah, then I infuse into that Sefer Torah L'Shma. So if I need to have Shmura Matzah, needs to be watched and infused, injected, we'll call it, in the Matzah or L'Shma or L'Shem Matzah's Mitzvah, it's questionable, and obviously it's whatever the minig is in different places are, but when someone has a question, should I spend the extra few bucks to buy myself the Shmur Matzah, this should be evaluated, such a consideration that, am I putting in Lishma in the L'Shem Matzah's Mitzvah by switching on that switch? On the other hand, I'm not putting away the other tzad because they feel that it's a bigger hitter. On the one hand, if I've less chance for chametz to be able to, when it's a systematic kind of a thing, and the machines just keep on moving, it's a lot more systematic than in a matzah bakery, where someone could by mistake, chapashmuz, or even a typical kind of thing, which would be, if the girls who are working at the tables, if they would be spitting out by mistake as they're talking, they don't realize, and they spit something out, they run themselves into the biggest problem, because it's spit, reik, could be machmitz simultaneous. You don't even have the 18 minutes, and then you messed up the whole matzah.
So the smear can have folds, creases.
Yeah, you have many different issues, right? So it's really, you have to evaluate. It's a give and take a little bit. But that's why everyone should do whatever their minig is. But I mean, just to bring out as far as the lishma is concerned. Now whatever the share at the last session, we said that we're not going to say any shiurim, but whatever shiurim are size that one has to eat for the kazayas matzah, for the dalat kaisis. The dalat kaisis, I don't mean that now, but the kazayas matzah or the marror, it's important always to take into consideration that matzah falls on the floor, or matzah falls onto one's suit or whatever it is. And some of the sizes were given when it's a drop thinner or a drop thicker, so it would probably always be better to take a drop more than the smaller share, just to make sure that you're definitely covering yourself, because minat Torah, you need to eat a certain amount, and you're going to be, the share was, let's say, given 10 grams, I don't know, but let's say 10 grams of matzah, and one only eats 10 grams, but the 10 grams is when, and you don't realize that a couple of pieces by mistake fell down your shirt, and you realize until after you got up, and then all of a sudden the floor is all dirty, and you realize that was from your kazayas matzah. So mafreya, you realize that you weren't mekayim your mitzvah, which was a bit of an issue. So it's always kedai, and even when you have the size, sometimes people say it's the size of a hand, or size of two hands, a different size of matzah. Again, that goes into how thick the matzah is, how thin the matzah is. So it always pays to get a drop more than that, and not to be skimpy on the small share, because just so that make sure that you're safe on all ends. Okay.